Part 4. A Choice in the Shadows. Garwood's breath came in ragged gasps as he paused to reload his revolver as he made his way deeper into the warehouse. The pain in his side was growing worse, but he couldn't stop now, not when he was so close. He found Olivia in a locked room, her eyes wide with terror as he burst in. "We're getting out of here," he said, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. But as they made their escape, the final obstacle stood before him. Salvatore Carlucci, the crime boss himself, flanked by armed men. They stood at the entrance to an underground tunnel that led to the river, a smuggling route known only to the inner circle of the mob. "You think you can take her and walk away, Garwood?" Carlucci sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. Garwood's hand rested on his revolver, but he knew he couldn't take them all, not in his condition. His eyes flicked to Olivia standing behind him, her frail body trembling. He had promised to get her out, and that promise weighed heavier than the gun at his side. "Let her go, Carlucci." "You don't need her anymore," Garwood said, his voice steady, though every fiber in his body screamed with pain. "The Irish aren't coming for your mistress. This ends here." Carlucci chuckled, lighting a cigar with a flourish. "You think you're in a position to tell me how this ends, detective? You've always been a thorn in my side, the last good man in a rotten city. But this is my world. You've lost." Garwood felt the weight of his decision. In a way, Carlucci was right. The city was corrupt to its core, and here he was, bleeding outnumbered, facing a man who held all the power. A man he could end right now if he wanted to. His fingers itched toward his .357, knowing he had 6 bullets, 6 chances to bring Carlucci down. But Olivia, she was the real mission. Time seemed to slow as he calculated his options. He could draw and shoot Carlucci, take out as many of his men as he could, but that would leave Olivia vulnerable. If he went for her, Carlucci would escape. The city would remain in his grip, and more people would suffer. But if Garwood chose to save her now, he could always find another day, another way, to bring the crime boss to justice. The sound of guns being cocked echoed through the tunnel. Carlucci's men were ready. Garwood closed his eyes, exhaling slowly. He made his decision. In a flash, he grabbed Olivia's arm and pulled her toward the tunnel. His free hand flew to his ankle holster, whipping out the smaller .38 revolver. It barked once, twice. 2 of Carlucci's men dropped to the floor, giving Garwood the opening he needed. "Run," he yelled to Olivia, pushing her ahead of him as he fired behind them, keeping the mobsters at bay. The tunnel twisted and turned, its dark walls swallowing them up as they fled toward the river. Garwood's breath was labored, and the wound in his side burned with each step, but he didn't slow, not until they reached the end of the tunnel, where a hidden dock led to a small boat tethered in the shadows. Garwood stumbled, his vision blurring for a moment. Olivia caught his arm, her small hand steadying him as best as she could. "Stay low," he whispered, pulling her into the boat. His hand moved to his side, blood seeping through his fingers. He was running out of time. But just as they began to push off, Carlucci appeared at the end of the dock, flanked by 2 more armed men. The crime boss clapped slowly, the smirk never leaving his face. "You can run, Garwood, but you'll never win. You're just one man." Garwood met Carlucci's gaze, and for a fleeting moment, he was tempted to drop the empty .38, to draw his .357 and put an end to it right then and there. But he couldn't risk it, not now, not with Olivia's life in the balance. As the boat drifted into the murky water, Garwood holstered his empty .38, watching as Carlucci grew smaller in the distance. He had let the crime boss live, for now. But his conscience weighed heavily, the moral burden pressing down on him as the boat cut through the darkness. Would this city ever change? Would men like Carlucci ever truly be brought to justice? Could he live with himself knowing he had let the man escape? "Are you okay?" Olivia's voice broke through his thoughts, her eyes wide with concern. Garwood nodded, though the pain in his side said otherwise. "I will be." The boat glided toward the riverbank, and Garwood tied it off, wincing as his wound pulsed. Olivia climbed out, her feet unsteady on the dirt. Garwood followed, his body feeling heavier with each step. But despite the pain, despite the nagging doubt in his mind, he had done what he came to do. He had saved her. He watched as the city lights flickered in the distance, casting long shadows over the water. This battle was over, but the war wasn't. Carlucci had escaped, but Garwood had a promise to keep, a vow to hunt him down no matter the cost. The next time they met, there wouldn't be any more second chances. Olivia tugged at his sleeve, breaking him from his thoughts. What happens now? Garwood looked down at her, his expression softening for the first time that night. Now, I take you home. But even as he said it, he knew that this wasn't the end. Carlucci was still out there, the city's corruption still festering beneath the surface. Garwood might have saved Olivia, but the shadows of Kansas City still loomed large, and he would never stop fighting them. As they walked into the night, Garwood silently vowed that he would make things right. If it was the last thing he did, he would bring Carlucci to justice. Because in this city, where men like Carlucci thrived and the innocent suffered, sometimes all it took was one man to stand against the tide. And that man, as always, would be Detective Beauregard Tecumseh Garwood.